I think the biggest difference between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom can be summed up in a single word: density. Tears of the Kingdom has a far denser world than Breath of the Wild did. I've seen people describe Breath of the Wild's world as empty, and I don't think that's totally fair. Breath of the Wild's world contained at least 100 hours worth of content, of puzzles and collectibles and side quests. But what can make it feel empty is that all of that content was very spread apart. Much of my time in the game was spent journeying towards my objectives, quietly traveling through a beautiful but barren post-apocalyptic world. It was a tranquil and slow-paced game. On the other hand, Tears of the Kingdom is such a dense game by comparison. Its world is absolutely filled with so many things to do. In the early game, I felt like I couldn't take 20 steps without running into another new puzzle or minigame or side quest. One of the first objectives I set for myself was Rito Village. The first people I wanted to visit were my old avian pals. If you take a straight shot from Hyrule Field to Rito Village, you can get there in under 10 minutes. It should be a quick journey. But it took me nearly 30 hours of playtime to reach the Rito, because every 20 steps I got distracted by something else. Another shrine, another tower, another side quest, another minigame, another puzzle, another monster den, another cave, another well, another chasm. And usually those distractions would lead directly to other distractions. And so 5 hours later, I'd somehow end up on the opposite side of the map from my original objective. This was my entire experience of playing Tears of the Kingdom. It always felt like there was too much to do. It took me over 100 hours just to beat the game, and I didn't come close to completing all of the shrines or side quests or upgrading everything I could upgrade. I never even defeated a single one of those Gleeoks, these freaking three-headed laser beam dragons. I cannot even guess how long it would take to 100% complete everything in this game. Tears of the Kingdom is not only one of the biggest video games ever made, it is one of the densest. And in this way, Tears of the Kingdom has fixed one of Breath of the Wild's greatest flaws, that feeling of emptiness or shallowness that the original game had. I think Tears of the Kingdom managed to fix or at least improve upon every single one of Breath of the Wild's biggest flaws. Tears of the Kingdom is such a massive improvement over the original that I worry that it has actually made Breath of the Wild kind of irrelevant. Tears of the Kingdom is such a better game. Is anyone going to choose to play Breath of the Wild anymore when they can play its much improved sequel instead? So, to begin this discussion of how Tears of the Kingdom improved upon its predecessor, I want to list off what I think were Breath of the Wild's 5 greatest flaws. First, a rushed and underbaked main quest line with repetitive dungeons. Second, a lack of compelling side quests. Third, simplistic and easy shrines. Fourth, a lack of variety in environments, and fifth, a lack of variety in enemies. Notice I did not include weapon degradation on that list. I will discuss weapon degradation separately at the end of the video. So let's start with the first flaw, a rushed and underbaked main quest line with repetitive dungeons. As much as I loved its world and its gameplay, I was often disappointed by Breath of the Wild's main quest lines. There just wasn't enough to them. You could complete them all very quickly. For example, for the Rito questline in Breath of the Wild, all you do is show up, play a single minigame, and then it throws you straight into the Divine Beast. The whole thing can be completed in less than 10 minutes. The Divine Beast Va Meadow isn't even really a problem. All it's doing is flying around in circles. It never feels like a serious threat or like it's causing any crisis. By comparison, in Tears of the Kingdom, when you reach Rito Village, you find a town that is being buried beneath the ice and cold, a village whose very existence is under threat. This is a serious problem that needs to be solved. There is urgency in this quest. There are actual stakes. From the village, you have to track down first Hearth and then Tulin, both of whom draw you deeper and deeper into the dangerous cold wastes, across mountains and through caverns. And when you find Tulin, you launch into this completely crazy, massive open-air platforming section, where you and your adorably cute bird boy partner ascend higher and higher into the sky, until you rise above this gargantuan cyclone, and dive down through its middle to reach this area's dungeon. This whole quest line is awesome. It's so much fun to do. It takes thought and effort and time to complete in a way that Breath of the Wild's questline didn't. It's exciting and creative. It requires you to actually interact with the world and the characters in interesting ways. And this applies to all of Tears of the Kingdom's main questlines. The Gorons, the Zora, the Gerudo, and the Spirit Sage all have equally interesting, equally creative, equally serious, equally interactive questlines. It is a vast improvement over Breath of the Wild. And next we have the dungeons. In Breath of the Wild, the classic Zelda series dungeons were replaced by the 4 divine beasts. Instead of an intricately designed series of puzzle-filled rooms that connect together in really clever and smart ways, the divine beasts were these large, open, mechanical spaces that combined Breath of the Wild's player freedom-focused gameplay with the clever puzzle design of previous games' dungeons. I actually thought the divine beasts were well designed and I enjoyed them all, but I also found them to be repetitive. The 4 divine beasts were very similar to each other. In some ways, it felt like you were completing the same basic dungeon 4 different times. And like a lot of longtime fans, I missed the more structured dungeon designs of previous games. Tears of the Kingdom's temples contain vastly more variety than Breath of the Wild's divine beasts. Every single one of these temples feels totally different and distinct from all the others, not just in visual style, but in the kinds of puzzles you will solve within them, how you navigate the dungeons. For example, the Spirit Temple is all about the Ultra Hand ability, about crafting your own mechanical devices in order to navigate these ruined cavernous spaces. There's still a lot of player freedom, you can still approach the challenges in whatever order you want, and how you solve the puzzles is largely up to you, and it still isn't really the same as the Zelda dungeon designs of older games, but the puzzles feel far more structured and rigorous than the Divine Beasts did in a way that's ultimately really satisfying to complete. I believe the weakest temple in Tears of the Kingdom is the Wind Temple because it's closest in design to the Divine Beasts. I found all of the other temples to be far more interesting because they were very different. Anyway, I think Breath of the Wild's second greatest flaw was its lack of interesting side quests. When you have a huge open world, one of the best ways to fill that world with meaningful content is through side quests. Little adventures and stories and characters that can fill the game's world with life. Give the player more opportunities to interact with that world and its characters, to explore it, to learn more about it, to be a part of it. All of the best open-world fantasy video games rely on the quality of their side quests. Think of Skyrim or The Witcher, how empty those games would feel if you removed their side quests. Now, Breath of the Wild was filled with side quests. It must have had hundreds of them, but so many of them were so boring. They would have you take a picture of a monster, or collect 20 butterflies, or some equally inane minor task. They were just these little tedious chores instead of little exciting adventures. There was no story to them, no interesting interaction with the world or characters. To be fair, it did have a couple interesting side quests, like the Terrytown quest was awesome. Building a brand new village was really cool. There was a quest in Kakariko Village where you investigate the theft of an important heirloom that actually involved investigating different characters and learning about their lives. That was cool too. But these genuinely good side quests were far too few. It contributed to the empty feeling that some players had when playing the game. Tears of the Kingdom is absolutely filled with interesting and creative side quests. Every single town, every single village, and many of the stables have at least one extended side quest that involves you interacting with multiple characters, solving puzzles, doing something new, following a little adventure or story to a satisfying conclusion. And outside of the towns and stables, there are even more side quests out in the world for you to find. My favorite side quest in Tears of the Kingdom is Lurelin Village. Back in Breath of the Wild, Lurelin Village was this sort of random tiny village tucked away in the far corner of the map. It was so small and so out of the way, it was possible to just completely miss it. But in Tears of the Kingdom, it's the site of the game's best side quest. In this game, Lurelin Village has been destroyed by monster pirates, burned to the ground, all of its villagers scattered across Hyrule Kingdom. As you explore, you will meet these scattered villagers, and they all talk about the tragic fate of their home. When you finally journey to the far corner of the map, you'll find a monster-infested wasteland in Lorellan Village's place. But you can rescue and rebuild this village piece by piece. First, you have to defeat all of the monsters and then gather a ton of building materials, which for me meant building a lumber truck and driving 20 piles of wood across country, which was really fun. I could play Legend of Zelda Ice Road Trucker literally forever. And then you build and repair each home and building in the village. You can even trace the monster pirates back to their original hideout on this distant island. The whole thing is really well designed. Tears of the Kingdom has side quests this elaborate and this interesting in every corner of the map. Because of these high-quality side quests, the game feels so full of life and characters. Once again, it's a dramatic improvement over the original. I think Breath of the Wild's third greatest flaw was its simplistic and easy shrines. Previous Zelda games had huge dungeons, with room after room of interconnected puzzles. Breath of the Wild replaced these with shrines, teeny tiny miniature dungeons where you would usually only complete one lone puzzle. I did enjoy these shrines. I thought they were largely well designed, and they fit in with the open world gameplay of Breath of the Wild. But I also found them to be very, very simple and very, very easy. I don't think I was ever stumped by a shrine in Breath of the Wild. I don't think I ever truly felt challenged by them. I never had to think really hard or experiment much to find a solution. The shrines in Tears of the Kingdom are pretty simple, but I struggled far more often with these. I actually got legitimately stumped a few times. And many of the shrines required an extended period of trial and error and experimentation before I found a solution. The puzzles here are more interesting, more creative, and more challenging than in Breath of the Wild. There is one reason for this, and that reason is the new Ultra Hand ability. With Ultra Hand, you can attach any object in the game to any other object, combined with the game's huge variety of mechanical Zonai devices, and you can build almost anything. You can build cars, and you can build boats, and helicopters, and airplanes, and rocket ships, and fire-spitting death Roombas. The possibilities for puzzle design with this new ability are truly endless. In the shrines, I never felt like I was just repeating some old puzzle or challenge. In every single shrine, even after over 100 hours of playtime, I still felt like I was always doing something new. I was always getting challenged by some totally new puzzle that I hadn't seen before. It's a remarkable achievement. Ultra Hand is just a much better and more creative ability than anything that Breath of the Wild had. It's a much better tool that allowed for much better and more creative puzzles. There is no comparison between the quality of the shrines in these two games. The shrines in Tears of the Kingdom are so consistently more interesting. I think Breath of the Wild's fourth greatest flaw was its lack of variety in its environments. So Breath of the Wild was a game that's all about exploration. And one of my personal favorite things to discover in a game while exploring is a new creative and weird or alien environment. Something unusual within the world design itself, something unexpected, something I've never seen before. For example, Elden Ring was another open-world fantasy game that did exploration really well. And part of what made its exploration so good was the variety in its environments. You start off Elden Ring in a basically standard medieval fantasy sort of area, but from there you go to all these crazy and creative places, like the hostile, rot-infested, and totally bizarre Caelid region. Or another of my favorites was Liurnia of the Lakes, an entire region sinking into a swamp, the magical Raya Lucaria Academy towering over the landscape. Elden Ring made exploration exciting because there were always new environments left to discover, each of them totally different from every other environment in the game. As much as I loved Breath of the Wild's world design, because it really was a world I wanted to spend a lot of time in, I found it to be tranquil and beautiful and melancholy, and I really genuinely liked it. But I always wished its environments had more variety. The vast majority of Breath of the Wild's world is made up of rolling green hills or little forests or mountains. Those make up like 2/3 of the entire game's world. Sure, there was a jungle and a desert and some snowy areas, and those definitely helped the environmental variety, but it wasn't enough. Too much of the world felt too similar. Tears of the Kingdom has added 3 new types of environments, and these 3 new areas go a really long way to making the world feel much more varied this time around. Tears of the Kingdom added caves, sky islands, and most importantly, the depths. Caves have always been a big part of Zelda's world design, so it was strange that there weren't any to find in Breath of the Wild. In Tears of the Kingdom, every single mountain and high hill is completely riddled with tunnels and caverns, and many of them are really big, long, and twisting underground labyrinths. Every time I entered a new cave, I had no idea how long it would be until I came back out again. The caves have their own atmosphere, their own monsters, and their own challenges. They add a huge amount of new variety to the world. Next are the Sky Islands. Despite how heavily the Sky Islands were shown off in promotional materials prior to the game's release, I was surprised by what a small part of the game's world they actually comprise. The Sky Islands are almost all very small, and their layouts are pretty repetitive. I definitely felt like after the first few I was just re-exploring the same couple basic islands over and over again, but with that criticism aside, they are still a brand new environment, with their own atmosphere, their own unique challenges not found anywhere else in the game, and they certainly add a lot of variety to the world. Tears of the Kingdom's really standout new environment is the depths. I freaking adore these depths. They feel utterly different than anything in any other Zelda game. The depths are alien, they are strange, they are hostile, they are absolutely pitch black, and you can only light them up piece by little piece. Exploration is slow and methodical down here. The depths are full of gloom, this malice-like tainted substance that reduces your maximum number of hearts. Many of the enemies down here are also infested with gloom, and when you get hit, you don't just lose health, you lose the ability to regain that health, making exploration of the depths especially dangerous. The fauna of the depths is so strange and so unlike anything else in the game that it really feels like you're exploring another world, fully disconnected from the one above, where strange new forms of life flourish, where you'll find incredibly ancient abandoned mining sites of the mysterious Zonai civilization. And the depths are absolutely massive. These huge caverns feel like they're nearly as big as the surface. The depths are truly an entire new world lying underneath the one we're familiar with. The depths are awesome. They are dangerous and strange. They remind me a lot of the Caelid region in Elden Ring. Both of them are alien environments with completely unique flora and fauna. They're both extremely dangerous, with oozing toxic substances that impart debilitating status effects on your characters. Most importantly, the depths completely transform the environmental variation of the game. You're not just exploring samey green rolling hills for the entire adventure anymore. Now you're exploring caverns and sky islands in the truly alien depths. It makes for a much more varied game. I think Breath of the Wild's fifth greatest flaw was a lack of variety in enemies. For most of Breath of the Wild, it felt like I was only battling against 3 different enemy types: Bokoblins, Moblins, and Lizalfos. Now, that's not entirely fair, because there were also Yiga clan soldiers, and a lot of mini-bosses like Hinox and Stone Taluses and Lynels, and there were the Guardians too. But once again, I'm going to make a comparison to Elden Ring. Elden Ring has an incredible variety of enemies. Elden Ring has well over 100 unique enemies to fight, which is amazing. That's a ton of variety. Of course, Elden Ring is primarily an action game. The only way you interact with the world in Elden Ring is through combat, so it really needs a lot of different enemy types in a way that Breath of the Wild doesn't. Breath of the Wild is more of a puzzle and exploration game than it is an action game. It's more important that it has a lot of variety in ways to interact with that environment and in puzzles, because those are its focus. It's a different kind of game with different priorities. But still, Breath of the Wild would have benefited from some more variety in its enemy design. Now, admittedly, Tears of the Kingdom still doesn't have a huge amount of variety in enemies. It doesn't come anywhere close to Elden Ring, but Tears of the Kingdom did basically double the number of unique enemy types, which is still a pretty big leap in enemy variety. In Tears of the Kingdom, you can find the new Horriblins and Like-Likes in caves. You can find Frox down in the depths. You can find the phenomenally well-designed Flux Construct mini-boss on the Sky Islands. islands. You can find the new Aracuda flying monsters all over the place. You can find Zonai battle constructs everywhere. You can find the new battle taluses all over the place too, which are a really cool twist on the old stone taluses. You can find Gibdos in the desert, and the extremely imposing and dangerous three-headed dragon Gleeox serve as the new ultimate overworld challenge. And all of these enemies feel totally unique and different. They all require different tactics. They all have multiple variations that you'll have to approach slightly differently. Once again, Tears of the Kingdom has taken a flaw in Breath of the Wild, and if not totally removed it, at least made it way better. But there is one more big flaw from Breath of the Wild that I need to discuss, which is weapon degradation. Before the release of Tears of the Kingdom, I posted a whole video just about the weapon durability system, so I don't want to repeat myself here. All I will say is that my biggest problem with the weapon durability system was the way it devalued exploration. Exploration wasn't as exciting when the only reward for exploration was finding another weapon that will very soon break. I think that problem has been resolved in Tears of the Kingdom. Weapons are no longer your primary rewards for exploring. Instead, you are more often going to be rewarded with upgrade collectibles, or outfits or gems and other materials rather than weapons. Generally, weapons feel very different to me in Tears of the Kingdom than they did in Breath of the Wild. In the previous game, I was collecting weapons, finding them in chests, taking them off defeated enemies. But in Tears of the Kingdom, because all weapons everywhere have been degraded and made basically worthless by the spreading gloom, I instead had to forge all of my own weapons using the new fuse ability. In this new game, you make all of your own weapons, almost always by fusing a weapon base with a monster part. You receive a weapon monster part every single time you defeat an enemy, and the monster part will be exactly as strong as the monster you defeated. You will always have as many weapons as monsters you have killed. Anytime I wanted more or better weapons, all I had to do was go fight some strong monsters. In Tears of the Kingdom, even with my weapons breaking, I always had exactly the weapons I wanted. I could make whatever weapon I wanted whenever I felt like it. To me, the weapon durability system feels totally irrelevant in Tears of the Kingdom. With so many weapon making materials so readily available, it just doesn't feel like it matters. The weapon degradation actually draws me into more fights with strong monsters, because I know I will always be rewarded with strong weapons for my efforts. However, if you truly hated the weapons breaking in Breath of the Wild, if the act of your weapons breaking is simply intolerable to you, then it's still going to be intolerable to you in the sequel. If all you hated was the fact that weapons broke at all, you will still hate it. There's nothing for you here. You'll just have to go enjoy one of the other literally dozens of great games that have been released in the past year. But moving on. In some ways, Tears of the Kingdom feels more like a remaster or a remake of Breath of the Wild than an actual sequel to it. There have been several high-profile remakes this year, like Dead Space and Resident Evil 4. When I played the Resident Evil 4 remake, I felt like I was playing an updated version of Resident Evil 4, a new version of the exact same game, exploring the same places, fighting the same enemies, while fixing some of its flaws, adding in some cool new abilities and areas, making it easier and more fun to play. I felt the same way about Tears of the Kingdom. When I play it, I feel like I'm just playing Breath of the Wild, except a lot better. I'm re-exploring the exact same locations. I'm fighting a lot of the exact same monsters. I'm meeting the exact same characters again. Even the story feels very similar in some ways. Except this time, it's been done bigger and been done better. It feels fuller, denser, more creative, more fluid this time around, just the way a good remake would. In a year of fantastic remakes, I think Tears of the Kingdom may actually be the best remake of them all.